Welcome in, everybody. I'm Reed Cowan. Okay, so another big day. We're counting down to the finish line of the Republican National Convention. In fact, our video monitors are taking us once again to Milwaukee and also other parts of the country, reacting in real time to President Biden sidelined by COVID amidst more calls for him to step aside. This is CBS News 24/7. Let's go. Streaming coast to coast and worldwide, when breaking news happens in your community, CBS is there. And this is breaking news right off the top of this broadcast. 4 people, including a child, shot in Washington, D.C. Right now, police have a manhunt on their hands. They're looking for this car, a blue Dodge Charger with heavy tint in connection to that shooting. Police say 3 suspects wearing black clothing fired and then just took off in this white sedan, also caught on surveillance video right now. And right now, we also have an update. Police confirm that 2 adult male victims pronounced dead on the scene. We don't have an update on the condition of the child that we talked about right off the top. Homicide detectives are, though, on the scene. We're going to follow this through this broadcast and bring you any developments on this manhunt in that part of the United States as soon as we get them. Meanwhile, our video feed's taking us to Delaware, where right now the President of the United States is in isolation due to COVID. You see the video here. It is of the president arriving home, starting a pause in his rigorous campaign schedule. He is in isolation now. That's not helpful because today more powerful voices from within the Democratic Party say President Biden should get out of the race and do it fast. We're going to have more on that in just a minute. But we also want to ride our video monitors live to Milwaukee on the last day of the Republican National Convention. In fact, you are looking right now. That's the main stage of the RNC where Donald Trump will accept his party's nomination. Meantime, today, a lot of new questions and criticism over alleged security failures in the assassination attempt on former President Trump. We want to show you this video. A group of senators at the RNC chased down Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle last night. They demanded answers about what they say are the agency's failure to prevent that shooting. And more questions today. New analysis from CBS News confirmed. Watch the screen. Shows the gunman, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, was about 460 feet away from Donald Trump. It also shows the location of the attendees who were caught in the line of fire. Then a different perspective shows the shooter's view, including a tree between Crooks and the sniper team closest to him. Now, that could be very key because that tree, we understand, could have impaired the sniper's sight line. So let's bring in Charlie DeMar. He's in Butler County, Pennsylvania. Charlie, the demand for answers, as we just saw there at the RNC, are white hot today.
And, Reed, we just got some new information that former President Donald Trump actually got a briefing on his own assassination attempt by the director of the Secret Service, Kim Cheadle, on Tuesday. And, again, this investigation continues to evolve as we speak. There's been a photo that has been central to this of the shooter that was taken about 26 minutes before the shooting. That was taken actually by one of the law enforcement officers on scene here. That law enforcement officer noticed that the 20-year-old shooter was acting suspicious, that he was on the grounds with a rangefinder, and snapped that photo, sent it up the chain of command. There's also been video floating around of the shooter seemingly just wandering around the grounds here, which again raises more questions of how was the shooter able to ultimately get up on the roof and fire those shots.
Charlie DeMar, thank you for your live update. We know a lot of people want answers to that. We want to go back to Milwaukee right now on the last day of the Republican National Convention. You're looking at the main stage. That's where Donald Trump is expected to step forward on the stage, address the cameras, address the nation, and accept his party's nomination. Now, you just heard what happened there with the assassination attempt. That has likely shaped how he is going to talk to the nation. In fact, his speech reportedly rewritten altogether after surviving that assassination attempt. And we got a little bit of a preview from what he will say. This is from his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, today on CBS Mornings. This is what she had to tell our Tony DeCopel. Take a listen.
Well, I think you may see a bit of a different version of Donald Trump tonight, perhaps a bit softer version than maybe some of the people at home have seen in the past. And maybe that allows them to open themselves up to actually what he's saying.
So let's bring in CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand live in Milwaukee. You heard it there, Natalie, a softer version of Donald Trump. The question is, will it last past the convention? And is this more strategic?
And that's a big question, Reed, moving forward. I want to share with you, I just spoke to a Republican from North Carolina, asked her what she would like to see tonight. And she emphasized that she wants to see a kinder, gentler version of former President Trump. She says there's no question that someone has to be impacted by what happened on Saturday, the attempted assassination. Lara Trump also referenced that, saying that her father-in-law was impacted, and we'll have to wait and see what Trump says about that horrific event, and then also what his tone is tonight. As we've been talking about all week long, a lot of Republicans here and delegates, they also want to hear about unity, how the Republican Party and former President Trump are going to try to bring Republicans together. We've seen a lot of unity here in Milwaukee this week, but as you referenced, the question moving forward is what happens, after this wraps up tonight. And of course, all eyes will be on Michigan on Saturday when Trump and his new running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, hold their first joint rally.
Well, and I love the proximity you have there in Milwaukee. You mentioned talking to that voter from North Carolina. Voters have now had several hours to react to what J.D. Vance had to say. What are you hearing from voters about his speech and his remarks?
A lot of delegates I've talked to, they're excited about his youth, his age, just 39 years old, the energy they believe he will bring to the ticket. They're also touched, they say, by his personal story, which he really wove into his speech last night, growing up in poverty in Ohio, referencing his mother's struggle with drug addiction. She was actually in the convention hall last night. He mentioned she is now nearly 10 years sober. And it cannot go unnoticed, Reed, that he kept mentioning key battleground states, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, here in Wisconsin. He gave a preview last night of what he is going to do for the rest of campaign season, and that is to make a direct appeal to working class voters in those key states, in the Rust Belt, voters that could ultimately help decide the election in November.
Natalie Brand, thank you so much for that update. We look forward to more of your reporting. We want to get right now back to President Biden as he fights that newly diagnosed COVID. In fact, the president is in isolation in Delaware. He's off the campaign trail at really what is a crucial time in his re-election bid. We want to let you listen now to how the president sounded yesterday during an interview just before he tested positive for COVID. Listen.
Look, I had a terrible night on the debate night. I was exhausted. I'd been traveling around the world. I wasn't ready. And I performed terribly. And so people are now saying, well, that was only one thing. But he's 81 years old. What happens when he's 84 years old? What happens, when he's 85 years old? I was smart enough to know, with age comes wisdom. I know the difference between the truth and lies. I know the difference between good and bad. I know the difference between what has to be done. We've gotten more done in 4 years for the American people, including the Latino community, than any president ever has in a 4-year period.
So the president making his points there while also coughing. He doesn't sound very good. We want to talk to CBS News White House reporter Willie J. Inman. Willie, what's his condition right now?
Hey there, Reed. Good to be with you. Well, the president is behind closed doors today at his beach home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where I am standing right now. And we know that the president is having those mild symptoms. You heard him there in that interview, coughing. He also had a runny nose after testing positive for COVID-19. Following this interview, I'll note that the president was supposed to also take part in an event that was, of course, scrubbed because the president tested positive for COVID-19, and his schedule was moved up to depart for Rehoboth Beach, where he is expected to essentially remain until we know more about his condition or until he tests negative for the virus. I'll also note that the president's symptoms, although he had those mild symptoms, he doesn't have a high temperature. His temperature was normal. His pulse was normal, and that according to a note from his doctor. But the president himself and White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre saying that he's still going to do the work of the American people. The president putting out out a social media statement essentially saying that he feels fine. And White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre saying that the president is still going to work, although he's going to be isolated behind the scenes.
Willie, stay with me for a minute because I want to show our viewers some new polling as we look at the race to the White House. This is from Emerson College and The Hill showing Biden behind, 43 to 45% margin of error in Virginia, a state he won, by the way, by 10 points in 2020. We are also aware that former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has privately told Joe Biden, according to other reports, that he should step out of the race because he cannot win because of polls like this. Are you getting any signal from the Biden camp that they are at least responsive to some of these polls?
Yeah, well, the signals coming from the president himself and the White House and the campaign is that the president is in this to get another term. He's in it to win it. He wants to finish the job, as the president often says, that campaign slogan for his reelection campaign. And we did get a statement from Andrew Bates, one of the press secretaries at the White House, who essentially says President Biden is the nominee of the party. He plans to win and looks forward to working with congressional Democrats to pass his 100 days agenda to help working families. That coming from the White House after these reports surfaced about former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and Leader Schumer, I would also note, having these frank conversations reportedly with President Biden behind the scenes, drawing into question his electability. Now, of course, we did see over the weekend that the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump kind of threw some sand on these conversations, but they're still happening behind the scenes. If you look at these reports with prominent Democrats and others coming out and saying that the president should step aside because polling would indicate that former President Donald Trump has a lead in terms of the presidential race this November.
Well, and for Democrats, only 3 weeks to go. Willie, thank you so much for that report. So there you have it. President Biden sidelined, and that leaves his vice president, Kamala Harris, on the campaign trail today to make the case for another 4 years. We got this video to our monitor showing the vice president's arrival for events today in North Carolina. And, you know, perhaps one of her talking points to voters in the Carolinas is this: the Biden administration trying hard to prove that they can deliver on forgiving $1.2 billion in student debt for about 35,000 borrowers. Now, keep in mind, this has been a hard-fought battle for Democrats in recent months. So they've got a new go at it. It's a student loan forgiveness plan with a more narrow focus than before. So people in public service, teachers and firefighters will be the ones who are the benefactors of this student loan forgiveness. That is sure to be a talking point for the vice president as she talks to voters there in the Carolinas. When we come back, CBS News 24/7 will stream you video from Baltimore, a major series of damage from storms in that part of the country and other places. We'll be back watching the monitors in just a few minutes. Our eyes trained on Milwaukee and the center stage speaker for the night, former President Donald Trump. He wants the keys back to the White House. Tonight, he will accept his party's nomination. So as news develops inside that hall, we'll bring it to you right here live on the stream. But we also want to talk about a major story that shook Washington. We're talking about Pentagon leaker Jack Teixeira. He's facing trial by court-martial. He's accused of carrying out one of the most significant national security breaches in recent years, accused of sharing classified information in online messaging apps. Teixeira already pled guilty in federal court to charges brought by the DOJ, but the U.S. Air Force telling us now he'll face military charges of obstructing justice and failure to obey a lawful order. Let's take you to Russia now, and the case of U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich, back in a Russian courtroom today, facing charges of espionage. Russian authorities arrested the 32-year-old in March of last year without any evidence proving that he was gathering secret information of any kind. He is, by the way, the first Western journalist on trial for spying since the Cold War. The U.S. government, his employer, the Wall Street Journal, vehemently deny that Evan did anything wrong in Russia. But closing arguments are set for tomorrow. We'll be there. Jumping the map to New Jersey, and the headline causing many in the Democratic caucus to grimace. Despite a conviction in his corruption trial, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez says he's not going to resign. In fact, he tells CBS News efforts to force him into a resignation, they're not going to work. Digging in his heels while sentencing is set for October, after which Menendez vows he's going to appeal. Right now, we want to take you to storms of a different sort out of Baltimore. Our video monitor is showing us places where trees crashed down after storms rolled through that area. It has been a raucous summer for so many people in that part of the country. Winds came in, strong winds, toppled the trees, and made quite a mess. In fact, look at this. Our video feed showing the same story in nearby Pennsylvania. You see that network of power lines there sort of crisscrossing through the trees. Those trees are supposed to be up above the power lines, but they're down, and that knocked out power to thousands of customers there in York County. Looking live at Newark's airport. If you think our video shows a story that is over, you are wrong. Think again. Right now, thunderstorms impacting major airports all across the country. So if you're planning to travel in the next couple of days, listen to this. More than 15,000 flights delayed. More than 550 cancellations so far just today. That's according to FlightAware. And Zoe, let's bring you in. We understand there's threat of more storms.
Yes, more severe weather is on the way today. That's going to include some damaging winds. It might knock down even more trees and power lines potentially. And that's going to be our biggest impact today, as a reinforcing cold front is going to be moving all across the northeastern parts of the United States. So that first cold front moved through yesterday. Reinforcing cold front is moving through today, and it will continue to impact again far eastern parts of the United States. But you notice it also kind of tracks down south, and it will be bringing parts of the Gulf Coast a good amount of cloud coverage and a good amount of rainfall as well. Expecting rainfall rates upwards of 2 to 3 inches per hour. The areas in blue that you see, like Louisiana, could be seeing some excessive rainfall on top of already saturated soils. And it's not just down south in the Gulf states, but we're also dealing with the monsoon across eastern New Mexico, that they are going to be seeing the chance for some heavier rainfall. They actually have an excessive rainfall outlook that is currently in effect, and it will remain in effect all day long. So let's take a look behind me, and we can show you that chance for severe weather, where the radar currently is set up. Again, it's that secondary, that reinforcing front that is making its way across the country. That's going to be bringing more potential for severe weather. Again, far eastern North Carolina, my stomping grounds, my old stomping grounds, 60+ mile-an-hour wind gust on top of those 2 to 3 inches of rainfall rates per hour. Also going to be seeing again about a 15% risk of that chance for damaging wind gust, along with the chance for flooding. But we're also going to keep our focus on the monsoon. Eastern North Carolina going to be dealing with burn scar flash flooding, so widespread severe weather potential does stick around today. Reed.
Zoe, thanks. Hey, let's ride our video monitors now to France, where riders on horse will be back going for the gold. Look at this. Finishing touches on the equestrian Olympic sites on the grounds of the iconic Palace of Versailles. Beautiful there. Flattened ground and huge arenas now installed for dressage, courtesy of a lot of hard-working people there. Jumping and cross-country events expected to draw 16,000 spectators in person, and then millions, of course, on television and streaming. Keep in mind, we're less than 2 weeks away from the start of the Paris Olympics. When we come back, we're going to take you to the state of Florida. A crane collapse. Somebody survived, and then a tragedy for the person behind them. Just showing you how fate definitely is in charge. CBS News 24/7 back after the break. We'll be watching the monitors. Our live video feeds take you to Milwaukee on the last day of the Republican National Convention. Tonight, former President Donald Trump makes the case for why voters should re-elect him. We'll have more on that in just a minute. But first, we want to take you to Texas and that week-long work to bounce back from Beryl. So here's what we know right now. Crews are still working to get the lights back on. Today, we're hearing that crews near Dallas found at least 37 power poles either downed or just snapped in half from the force of that wind. In fact, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has called for an investigation into one of the state's major power carriers in the wake of the storms. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this broadcast. But, you know, his argument is bolstered by what you see here. This is out of Houston, where schools continue to operate without electricity. In fact, parents with kids in summer school not able to drop off their kids as planned. In fact, here's Chuck Hall with Robindale School.
The worst part about it to me is having to not know what to tell your parents. I've had mothers drive through the parking lot in tears saying that my boss said they're going to fire me if I don't come in today. I mean, we've gotten that same story over and over and over.
So the heat definitely on in Texas. Robindale School down to one room with air conditioning. That was a Texas conversation about heat. But Zoe, we understand heat's going to bear down on our country elsewhere.
Yes, unfortunately, we are looking at another heat wave that's on the way for the West Coast. But we have a day until it really takes hold. So that's a good thing, I guess, if you want to get out today and maybe enjoy some more comfortable heat. Also good news comes from the severe weather. The severe weather itself was not great, but it cooled things down significantly across the East Coast. Places that were dealing with the excessive heat just a couple of days ago. That cold front washed through, really cooled things down. But it's the west coast of the United States that we are going to continue to deal with the heat, deal with another heat dome that is going to take hold. So let's take a closer look at that, because again, we are going to be seeing that chance for the heat to continue across the west coast of the United States, where we are looking at these excessive heat warnings, excessive heat advisories that do remain in effect. That's going to be our biggest issue stepping out over the next couple of days this weekend. Especially across the desert Southwest, issues are going to arise, especially for places down in Southern California, Arizona, where temperatures are going to be well above 110, 115 degrees. That heat is only going to continue. That means heat-related illness is going to be a big risk this afternoon. But today, again, it's really Florida that's going to be impacted by it the most. Tomorrow, similar story. That cold front continues to cool off central and eastern parts of the United States, but it's the west coast that the heat will continue to build starting Friday, continuing into the weekend ahead of us, and even into Sunday. Look at that area that we are going to be seeing that excessive heat risk map, again showing you the areas in purple up across northern parts of the United States. Washington, that doesn't normally deal with this kind of heat. Many people don't have air conditioning, so keep that in mind as we step out this weekend. But again, it's going to take a day or two for this heat to really build. Reed.
All right, Zoe, let's jump the map and take our viewers to this video from China after a massive mall fire. Today is all about search for answers after the deaths of 16 people. Look at that. Clouds of thick black smoke seen pouring out of that building. Firefighters there endured 10 hours to get this one out. They had to use ladders, but you could see it was just burning at such high temperatures there inside that mall. We're understanding that the early indication from this, from investigators in China, this was partly to do because of construction there as a cause. Hey, look at this video coming off our monitors. This is out of Florida. We want you to look closely. This is dramatic video right now of a crane collapse in Fort Lauderdale that killed a construction worker. We're just getting the video that was shot in April showing the very moments after that crane hit somebody's car. You can see right there, somebody got out from that police body camera relatively unscathed. Lucky for that woman, but tragedy for the person who was driving a Tesla right behind her. That person, we understand, suffered brain damage. So pretty jaw-dropping video out of Florida. Of course, we know that crane collapses have been a big talking point in the country, and especially in the state of Florida in recent years, especially down in South Florida. Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk to CBS White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe. He is inside that convention center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we're going to be talking about what to expect tonight as Donald Trump accepts his party's nomination. Back after the break. Looking live right now inside and outside the building, hosting the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is the final day of the RNC, and today's theme is Make America Great Once Again. Tonight, Donald Trump will take to the stage and lay out his vision for the country, and Democrats anticipating what he will say from that stage, already firing back. Listen to this.
Trump is going to get up on that stage tonight and talk about how great he is. And he's going to ask Americans that famous question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Well, Donald, I've never been asked an easier question in my life. Yes.
So meanwhile, as it pertains to Democrats and the call for President Biden to get out of the race, it's been widely reported that Nancy Pelosi told President Biden polls show he can't win. Well, we just got this statement from a spokesperson for Nancy Pelosi. Here it is. Speaker Pelosi respects the confidentiality of her meetings and conversations with the President of the United States. Sadly, the feeding frenzy from the press based on anonymous sources misrepresents any conversation the Speaker may have had with the President. So let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe live in Milwaukee. May have had. That language seems careful. What's your take?
It always is with someone like her, and that's a reason why we have to so carefully parse all of these written statements that come in the wake of reports. There were some last night regarding Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the president. There was reporting about the House Speaker. There's fresh reporting on the former President Barack Obama. But here's the thing. All of this occurred in the last week. It's not like they got phone calls into the president last night or today, as far as we can tell so far. And in essence, and this is going to sound a little procedural, what it sounds like is going on here is we've cleared the assassination attempt hurdle and days of coverage, and it's almost as if people are now going back and realizing that the conversations about the president and his political future never really stopped because of the assassination. They just kind of simmered down.
Right.
And now they're turning the heat back up. And so when you see these kind of selective leaks start to happen, it's the various power centers of the party trying to flush out the president and say, maybe you didn't hear me last week, but here, let me reiterate it again, potentially. Think about this when you're on an already previously scheduled trip to Rehoboth this weekend, getting over COVID and taking some time to relax. Consider the numbers, consider the state of the race, consider whatever happens here in Milwaukee tonight with President Trump.
If the walls of that home in Delaware could talk, there would likely be a lot to say about what happens this weekend. You know, so far, the president's saying he's in it to win it. He's digging in his heels. He is not getting out. But, you know, anybody can go online, and there are many sources reporting that this is going to be a consequential weekend for Joe Biden. Do you feel that after this weekend, he could pull out of the race? And if so, what could happen then? Is it most likely that Kamala Harris will step in to take his place? And that underline highlighted, that is a big if. But is that what you would anticipate?
No, because I'm not in the business of feeling and anticipating. I think this much we know. His team says they're moving ahead, and the only indicator we'll get that he's not in it anymore is when or if he makes such a decision. This is not someone who responds well to public pressure. It does not respond well to this kind of political reporting that's out there. Cannot stand the speculation. It finds it absurd, as do his closest advisors, that this COVID diagnosis yesterday would be just the latest reason for him to get out. If anything, they see it as him being responsible, taking himself off the public stage and taking a few days to recover, as doctors recommend, and then going about the business next week. And let me reiterate, he had to postpone appearing at that event in Las Vegas, but otherwise was scheduled to go to Rehoboth Beach this weekend. So it's not like this was some emergency or hastily arranged visit to his beach home. This was always the plan anyway. And, you know, last weekend we were saying, or in advance of last weekend, everyone was saying this was the most consequential weekend of his political career. Well, it might have been up until about 6:15 Eastern on Saturday night, when the former president nearly died on stage at a campaign rally and the political calculus changed. And that's another element of what's going on here, is it's hard with all of these incredible fast-moving developments in the last several weeks, coming one after another, to really gauge whether the needle is moving. And by all accounts, the former president is winning or is leading in the head-to-head in the battleground states and nationally. But the Biden team would point out, those numbers are still single digits, still margin of error if you're looking closely at the polling, which means it's still essentially a 50-50 race, and there's still 3 months to go. And their argument is that's a lot of time. Most of the country isn't paying attention yet. They're still on vacation. They're getting ready only remotely to start thinking about sending the kids back to school. And then the fall will come, and they believe people will engage. The problem is, this weekend into next week, the Democrats were supposed to start laying the groundwork for the Chicago convention. And there were a handful of people who said maybe we should slow that roll and take it all up in Chicago in a few weeks instead. Biden campaign saying no. There was a primary. There was a calendar set. If you had issues, you should have engaged in the primary. And if you still have issues, you can try issuing some kind of motion in Chicago and go from there.
Right. Biden said, run against me. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much, live from the Republican National Convention. We appreciate it. So you're likely tonight going to hear about that assassination attempt on the former president. But, you know, we must not forget that that attempt on the former president was a murder for a Pennsylvania family. In just a little while, a memorial procession will get underway in Pennsylvania for Corey Comperatore. He's that volunteer firefighter and father who covered his family with his own body as those bullets flew, losing his own life in the process. The 50-year-old was also an Army reservist. CBS News 24/7, always in your communities. And last night we saw hundreds of people gathered to honor his memory. So let's get you to New York, and word of a twister that tore up the town of Rome. That's less than 50 miles away from Syracuse. We're talking about peak wind speeds of about 75 miles an hour. In fact, listen to Jennifer and Steve, who talked to our crews there on the scene, who survived.
So I threw her in the shower. I laid on top of her, and I had nothing to cover us. So I was looking around, and I found a 12-pack of paper towel. So I picked that up, and I just crouched down, and I covered us with it.
Then it looked like a black veil, like just coming down the street. And the window blew out, knocked me down. And then I'm just standing there trying to figure out where the hell to go.
So lots of property damage, but amazingly in that case, nobody was hurt. But similar scene in Pennsylvania and the town of Newville. And you could see right there, it is all about tree removal. You see all the trees there. Well, those trees at some places in that town covering power lines. And so electricity has been out for so many people. And some people with the lights out, they're looking up through rafters and seeing the sky where there should be a ceiling there. And this is what it is like in the United States. Hot in some parts and just downright dangerous with the weather in other parts. Zoe?
Yes, that's exactly what we're seeing. And the heat in the summertime actually makes the severe weather even worse. And that's the reason that we've been dealing with it basically all week long, and more chances for severe weather today. Unfortunately, as that first cold front that impacted us yesterday, a reinforcing cold front is going to make its way across eastern parts of the United States today. But you also notice it's not just the East Coast today. It's also kind of extending down across the South and into the Gulf Coast states, where it will be dropping a good amount of rainfall. In fact, upwards of 2 to 3 inches of rainfall per hour on already saturated soils is expected in places like Louisiana. Again, we are expecting upwards of 5, maybe even 6 inches over the next 6 to 8 hours, as the rainfall rates are going to be pretty heavy. But it's also going to be in places like eastern New Mexico. Although it doesn't look too heavy on a rainfall accumulation map, there is going to be an excessive rainfall outlook there. And we can show you that just by the areas in yellow along into the east of the central mountain chain that have dealt with burn scarring. We're also looking at flash flooding leading to burn scar flash flooding. And that's going to be a big issue. So let's take a look at where that storm system currently is located, because again, that first front that impacted us yesterday has already made its way off the East Coast, but it's the second front that you can currently see making its way across the central United States that will continue to push east into eastern North Carolina later today. And that's going to bring, again, damaging wind gust upwards of 60 miles an hour. It could knock down a few more tree limbs, and it could even potentially bring power outages as well. All things to keep our eyes on. And it's also going to be the rain. So it's all the way from eastern North Carolina down into the Gulf Coast states and even impacting eastern New Mexico. That's how long this line of severe weather is impacting us.
One thing we can all agree on, Mother Nature, just calm down.
Yeah, take a breath.
Take a breath, Mother Nature. Okay, when we come back, we've got our eye on America on maybe some shifting winds. We're talking about somebody who is making history speaking at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and what that could mean. We'll be back. So we are watching in real time what is expected to be remarks by the Vice President of the United States. Kamala Harris is now in North Carolina, another important state for the Biden administration to capture the win and go 4 more years in the White House. Now, keep in mind, we're watching this live picture where a rally is about to start. Meanwhile, the president is in isolation due to that COVID diagnosis. So that means the Vice President of the United States is very much crisscrossing the map, and she is making the case. In that room, you're likely to hear a lot about President Biden and the Biden administration's new push to forgive student loan for a lot of people. We're talking about 35,000 people who will be the benefactors of having student loan forgiveness. Not quite as wide of a plan as was originally attempted by the Biden administration. This will affect people who are first responders and teachers in our communities. More on that, and as soon as Kamala Harris takes to the stand there, we will bring that to you right now on the stream. Now this. Well, our eye On America series keeps us, as a news organization, focused on the issues you face in your communities. In fact, this week, it was a huge shift in union world. For the first time ever, a Teamsters president addressed the Republican National Convention. Sean O'Brien railed against big business, waging war, as he said, against American workers. You know, support for unions on the rise, and you may be surprised who is leading that charge. CBS's Janet Shamlian takes us to communities in Texas right now for this Eye on America.
You want to get a better benefit than a pension plan.
Juan and Diego Quintanilla are sheet metal workers campaigning near their job site in Richmond, Texas.
We're offering better pay, better benefits.
Not for a candidate, for an organization. They want to unionize.
If you belong to the union, they're going to take money out of your paycheck.
Yeah, but the benefits that we're going to get, it makes up for way more than what they're going to take.
The 19 and 23-year-old brothers are lobbying these tradespeople to vote yes.
What is it about your generation that's more interested in unions?
We seem to really care about fairness and like equality in the workplace. We all kind of want to get paid a good amount of money for the work that we're putting in.
Support for organized labor, polls indicate, is at a high not seen since the 1960s. Strongest among Generation Z, people in their teens and 20s.
Unions have been out of favor for decades. 20% of workers belonged to one in 1983. But by 2020, that number had fallen by half. Even as membership drops, union support is rising. 71% of Americans approve of them.
Unions had a difficult time making inroads in the South.
University of Texas Associate Professor Adam Cobb has studied unions.
Why do you think a lot of young people are so supportive of unions right now?
We see a really heavy concentration of power among big corporations and the elites that run them. And unions are a counterbalance to the strength of corporate power on the one hand and sort of shift some of that power to workers.
This is our shop.
Sheet metal worker Amber Sage Oliver is part of that young and new to the workplace group. Oliver estimates the same work in a non-union shop would pay at least $200 a week less.
Currently, I'm making about $33 an hour. So that's pretty good in comparison to people who just got out of college or university.
I don't buy the overall trend.
Erin Davis Valdez is a former teacher and union member. She says the teachers union let her down, motivating her to get into public policy to oppose them.
If you look at rates of unionization over time, they've either remained flat or gone way down. So I don't view this as an overall long-term trend.
So do you think this is misguided loyalty on the part of Gen Zs?
I think what will happen is they will be disappointed by what unions promise versus what they deliver.
That argument is just noise for the Quintanilla brothers.
So you guys are sold on unions. You're all in.
100%. We're all in.
A brotherhood that subscribes to the saying, in union, there is strength. For Eye on America, Janet Shamlian, Richmond, Texas.
All right, let's get back to talk of the RNC in Milwaukee. We can expect to hear from Donald Trump in his own words more about that assassination attempt tonight, but we cannot forget, we must not forget, that assassination attempt on the former president was a murder for a Pennsylvania family. And a memorial procession will get underway soon in Pennsylvania for Corey Comperatore. He's the volunteer firefighter and father who covered his family with his own body as bullets flew. He lost his own life in the process. Shelley Bortz joins us live from Freeport, Pennsylvania. Shelley, thank you for joining us. Set the scene for us.
Thank you for having me today. Well, people have started to file in here to say their last goodbyes to Corey Comperatore, the former fire chief and dad who died while protecting his own family at Trump's rally on Saturday. Let me step away from the camera here so we can take a live look at what we're seeing. We haven't been given the greatest vantage point. As you see, media is not allowed past these barriers you're looking at right now. But if we can zoom in, you can see emergency responders have already gathered to pay their last respects to Comperatore. Now, this community has been preparing throughout the morning. Our crews have watched as Buffalo Township fire trucks led a van carrying their former chief's body from the funeral home downtown here to Lobby Hall in Freeport in a small procession. Now, along that route, they drove by flags outside of St. Mary's Church that were placed by mourners in honor of the 50-year-old man who dedicated his life to service. Now, both as a firefighter and a 10-year veteran in the U.S. U.S. Army Reserves. Again, this visitation for Corey Comperatore gets underway at 2 o'clock and goes until 4, and then mourners will have another opportunity to pay their last respects to him again this evening from 6 until 8 o'clock. Tomorrow is his funeral, and it will be private. Back to you guys.
A husband, a father, and a loss in our world. Thank you so much for that. Let's head to Texas now. The air conditioning slowly coming on for people. We've talked a lot about in recent days CenterPoint Energy. They were criticized by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. The governor said, get a hustle on and get the power back on. And now the power company says nearly all of their 2 million customers, they have lights and AC. But people are still frustrated there after an unexpected outage hit the Department of Public Safety mega center. Watch.
I wanted to go to the closer DPS, but this one had an appointment sooner. And so I'm like, okay, I will drive far, far away to get to it. Yeah.
So there are also still a number of issues that need to be addressed. Traffic signals still out in many places, so people hot under the collar for that reason, Zoe, but also because of Mother Nature keeping the heat cranked up.
Oh, yeah. Mother Nature is going to be cranking up the heat over the next couple of days, especially across the east coast or the west coast of the United States. Excuse me. So let's just take a look at that hemisphere up and show you what we're going to be seeing over the next 24 hours, because the East Coast no longer dealing with all of the heat. They're going to be seeing that cold front making its way across, and they're also going to be seeing quite a lot of comfortable temperatures. The West Coast, though, that's where the big issue is going to lie as we step out over the next 24 to 48 hours. This weekend is going to significantly heat up across the West Coast, and that's what we're expecting, which is why we do have widespread excessive heat warnings, heat advisories that are going to remain in effect again all day Saturday and into Sunday. So the areas in pink, the areas in orange that are across Southern California, and it's including parts of Arizona and even parts of Southern Nevada. That's going to be our biggest issues. Temperatures in Las Vegas today, 110. Tomorrow getting up to 115. Parts of Death Valley up to 125. So the heat is only going to continue throughout this weekend. Making sure that you are aware of that. Heat safety is definitely going to be one of those top priorities for many places across the West Coast. But the biggest issue is going to be up north, places like Washington, Spokane. Seeing temperatures above 100 for them. A lot of places don't have air conditioning. So those are all things to keep our eyes on. Make sure you are practicing heat safety this weekend across the West. Reed.
All right, Zoe, thank you. You know, one of the promises of CBS News 24/7 is when we see it, you see it. And I just got this right now. It has the letterhead for the physician to the President of the United States, directly from the White House. And we want to share this with you. This is a very strong statement by the President's doctor as the President is sidelined in his campaign efforts in his Delaware home because of a COVID diagnosis. So I'm just going to read to you what I just got right here in my hand. He says the president is still experiencing mild upper respiratory symptoms associated with his recent COVID-19 infection. He continues to receive Paxlovid, so we know what the president is taking for medicine. He goes on to say he does not have a fever. His vital signs remain normal. He'll continue to conduct the business of the American people. And then the doctor goes on to say, with the president's permission, I will continue to provide regular updates as we have done before. Respectfully, Kevin C. O'Connor, the doctor, the physician to the President of the United States. The wording there is pretty telling. He says, with the president's permission, I will continue to provide regular updates as we have done before. That would connote that perhaps the President of the United States has not only given permission, but has directed his physician to keep the American people updated on his condition. Of course, this update comes amidst so many Democrats now calling for the president to step aside, to let somebody else take the reins and run for the presidency. And right now, we're going to go live to somebody who is campaigning in place of the president. This is where Kamala Harris will step to a podium and make the case for Joe Biden and 4 more years. You're watching CBS News 24/7.